Good afternoon and welcome to South Pole's webinar, Communicating on Climate, a Best Practice Guide. Thank you so much for joining us. It's lovely to have you here with us today. My name's Georgia Holt and I'm a Senior Business Developer here at South Pole in Australia, and I'll be your host for the day. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land from which I'm dialing in today, the Awabakal people. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands in which you are all dialing in today, and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders joining our webinar. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So now we come to everyone's favourite part, housekeeping. Attendees will be on mute and that will be for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions, we welcome you to ask them using the chat function. And if we don't get to answering your questions during the webinar, never fear, we will respond to them via email after the webinar. And finally, this webinar will be recorded, so we'll send a copy of the recording around to all attendees. And please feel free to share it with your friends and colleagues. Now, I am super excited to introduce you to our speakers for today, who will be sharing their insights on best practice when communicating climate action. South Pole's Head of Client Communications, Kata Boers, joins us from Amsterdam, and she will be taking you through the landscape of climate communications and some of the key principles. We are also joined by Matt Sprague, Associate Director, Principal Consultant for Climate Strategies, based in Sydney, who will be explaining climate neutrality and sharing the latest on South Pole's own climate neutral labels. And also joining us from Sydney is Ben Peacock, Global Director of Republic of Everyone, a South Pole company, to share his insights on creating authentic engagement with stakeholders. Now again, please submit your questions for our speakers using the question function. We'll come to them during the Q&A at the end. I'm sure that so many of you have heard of South Pole already, and indeed we have the pleasure of working with many of you. South Pole is a profit-for-purpose company founded in 2006 in Switzerland. We develop and implement comprehensive strategies that turn climate action into long-term business opportunities for companies, governments and organisations around the world. South Pole is also a leading project developer with over 1,000 projects in 50 countries who we have provided climate finance to in order to reduce 1 gigatonne of carbon dioxide emissions and to provide social benefits to less privileged communities who are particularly vulnerable to climate change. We have a team of over 950 experts across 25 offices, including growing teams in Sydney, Melbourne, Singapore, and the wider Asia Pacific region. And with that context, I'll hand it over to Kata to start us off with climate action's evolving landscape. Let's get rolling.
Thank you, Georgia, and very warm welcome to everyone. Let's start indeed by setting the scene. I have to tell that the space of climate claims and climate communication in general, it's a very evolving space and very evolving landscape. It has never been more important for businesses and brands to get their climate communication right. And why so? We all know that we have to transition to net zero. The world has to transition to net zero by 2050. And for that, we have to bring our stakeholders along. We have to join in action, and hence communication has never been more important. What we have seen is that stakeholder pressure has been mounting in the past couple of years. Governments have started to pass legislation even to make sure companies adhere to their and are true to their commitments and do not mislead consumers or customers with their communication. Also, corporate reporting initiatives have become a very important standard and proof of seal, so to say, when it comes to climate claims. Civil society is also very aware, and they won't hold back calling out companies if they think their claims or communication is greenwashing. And last but not least, consumers have become more educated, and they are seeking to buy and associate with products and services that integrate sustainability into their brand architecture or value propositions. This mounting stakeholder pressure has led to a movement and to a momentum in corporate climate action, and hence in corporate climate claims. In 2021, South Pole was curious to find out what was driving companies. And if you can skip one slide, Georgia, please. What's driving companies to set net zero targets? In the past 2 years, we've seen a real momentum, companies committing to climate action, and the best way to do that was and is, as of today, to set a net zero trajectory in terms of your actions. So South Pole surveyed companies to find out which stakeholders have put the highest pressure on them. And it turned out that consumer pressure was the most pertinent at that time for companies to set net zero targets and commitments. But also 72% of those companies have said that brand positioning, the benefits of that communication was driving them to really publicly commit to climate action in the long term. They were also keen, these companies were also keen to build resilience to the very physical impacts of climate change. They wanted to mitigate those risks coming from the impacts of climate change. And also 38% were keen to manage or even improve their reputation through sustainability. If you look at, so this is the top four drivers, driving net zero commitments. So net zero, it's a vision, it's a commitment for the long term. And if you look at the fifth element, which did not make to the top five, we've seen in 2021 that government pressure was really high on the agenda of the space of climate action, and it really drove companies to set net zero targets. This map is evolving really quickly. So, for example, in a couple of weeks' time, you would see even more countries, even more colors popping up, because countries do step up their regulations and do engage even in litigation cases when it comes to making sure that climate claims are accurate and credible. So you can see that there are several countries that already passed legislation, or there is a consumer and market authority guidance in place, or government standards, or court cases and litigation even. When it comes to another important stakeholder group, we can not mention the initiatives, the corporate climate action initiatives that have been evolving in the past 2 years. Science-based targets, CDP, Race to Zero, all those initiatives have become part of the mainstream conversation. It is best practice to work with those initiatives and towards those initiatives. And of course, as this is an evolving space, the debate is still ongoing, and the debate is still very much alive. For example, in terms of the voluntary carbon market initiative, they have just published their public consultation on climate neutral or carbon neutral claims that is supposed to be published by the end of this year. Or, for example, ISO is working on their guidance on climate neutrality to be published somewhere around next year. But also, just a news of yesterday, the UN has also set up a body to really look into net zero commitments and make sure that those claims and commitments are accurate and true to the companies. But let's take a look at what's at stake. What are the benefits of communicating? we already mentioned that companies really seek to build their reputation. So reputation in the communication space is everything. Reputation builds trust. Reputation is leading to increased purchase, loyalty of your customers or your consumers, and of course advocacy. So with integrating sustainability credentials in your business, in your strategy, and communicating around that, you can pursue a better and improved reputation. It also increases your brand value. Consumers expect, as we already mentioned, companies to take action and also to take a stance around sustainability or social issues. They are really much aware of the conversations or the movements of the world. So they want companies and the brands they associate with to take a stance on and take action on those very issues. And of course, we cannot not mention employees. There's a war for talent out there. It has been never more important to attract and retain people. Sustainability is a great driver, and engaging your employees around it is a great driver to build employee engagement. Now, this was all in the context of a long-term vision, of a net zero vision of corporate climate action. This year, in 2022, South Pole was curious to find out that there is a long-term vision, a long-term commitment towards net zero, and it won't happen overnight. We all have to work a lot towards that goal. But what is the status of action as of today? How companies are measuring up to take action as of today? And as per South Pole's guidance, a great milestone in a net zero journey and a very important milestone in a science-based net zero journey is to reach and achieve climate neutrality as of today. Climate neutrality can be reached as of today, and we will discuss later on the definitions and how to do that. But just to set the scene a little bit, we still see a little bit of a lack of corporate commitment to climate neutrality. South Pole has surveyed in 2022 more than 60,000 companies, and out of the 60,000 companies, only a handful, like 1,075, have set a climate neutral commitment. Some say they are already climate neutral, and some say they will be in the future. What we see is, and it's just almost 2% of those 60,000 companies. So we do see that companies still need a nudge to really commit to climate action. What we see is that bigger companies, publicly listed companies, or more visible companies are more likely to set climate neutral targets. You can see that 23% of Fortune 500 companies have already such a commitment in place. And from those companies who do commit to climate neutrality and do say and claim they are already climate neutral, only a handful, like 18%, back up their commitment or their pledge with a science-based target. So what we see is that we need still a nudge for companies to set a commitment to climate action. And then for those who set a commitment, they do need support and a nudge to align those commitments with a science-based and net zero pathway. And of course, we have to mention that being on the right side of history is good business. Kantar has done a research in 2021, and according to that research, environmentally conscious households are worth more than $400 billion to the FMCG industry. So there's a lot at stake, and we have to make sure that climate claims and communication is done in the right way. We brought you some regional and sectorial statistics as well. For example, if we look at the APAC region, only 27% of the companies that claimed climate neutrality, only 27% of them have also set a science-based target. So there is still room to improve also in the region for companies to align their climate neutral pathways in a longer term net zero pathway. You can you have heard maybe in media that the countries of France, Belgium and Luxembourg were very serious around controlling and regulating climate related claims. They're putting or publishing a claim that is not authentic or not credible or correct can lead to serious government fines. And even in those countries, we see that only 50% of climate neutral claims are aligned with science-based targets and hence aligned with a longer term net zero journey. If you look at the sectors, it's not a surprise that in the companies in the FMCG sector, consumer-facing companies, companies that have brands that interact with people directly, they are more likely to set climate neutral commitments. And of course, we have to mention the laggers as well. Companies in the energy, financial, or transportation sector still need a nudge and support towards aligning their climate neutral commitments with science. How to build credible climate claims and make sure that we lift up those percentages maybe next year when we do the study again. Basically, the first step is to build a robust foundation, and that robust foundation, which is basically your climate action, will make sure that you can and should say the right things. Building a robust foundation is very important. It's a fundamental action. You have to start actioning your climate commitments, and you have to earn basically the right to communicate about them. So we always nudge and urge companies to look first into their climate related actions and then start to communicate about that. If we can go 2 slides more, Georgia. Because there's a lot at stake when we don't get climate claims right. Reputation is at risk. We've seen that reputation is one of the key drivers for companies to communicate on climate and really set net zero pathways. But also it's a big risk if claims are not done right in the right way. In 2021, we've screened social media and traditional media, and we've seen that the topic of greenwashing, conversations around greenwashing and calling out companies have been on the rise. And also, according to a report from the UN, the fines and court cases linked to companies' ESG strategies have doubled in the past 5 years. So taking those risks very seriously is really important. When we are building credible claims, we advise our clients and companies to champion 4 key principles. First of all, they have to champion transparency. They have to avoid vagueness at all. They have to transparently talk about their journey. Net zero will not happen overnight. We all know that, but we have to be transparent about our journey, and we have to acknowledge difficulties and dilemmas, but also we have to celebrate successes that we reach on the milestones towards net zero. The second very important criteria is that companies have to be accountable for the claims and communications they put out. It can be done through honest and transparent disclosure and an update and report, regular update and report on progress. A very important criterion is authenticity when it comes to climate claims. Your climate action and hence your communication has to align with your wider sustainability strategy, but also it has to be integrated within your wider business growth strategy and hence your business narratives as well. Then you can create campaigns and narratives that are close to your company, that are close to your brand anyway, and then hence your customers and consumers can engage and associate with that brand much more easily because it's authentic to your whole. And last but not least, in terms of very important criteria is impact. Impact is everything. We do this all to really drive impact and drive the world towards net zero. And talking about impact and communicating about impact is really impactful. So we really do urge companies to champion looking at their impact when it comes to their climate claims. And as a result of that, such claims have to avoid vagueness or lack of proof. They have to be substantiated by real action. So the puzzle of credible climate action has been set in a way that in order to get to net zero tomorrow, we have to take action today. Today, a very important milestone for taking action is to reach climate neutrality, so that companies can set themselves up for success in a net zero trajectory. If we want to go more into the definitions of climate neutral and net zero, then we can skip to the next slide, Georgia, and we can see that climate neutrality means that a company has achieved a status of being climate neutral by balancing their unavoidable emissions, and that's the power of demonstrating action today. But all this put in a holistic and long-term vision of achieving net zero tomorrow. And as you can see, the other side of the puzzle, net zero basically is the state when we have decarbonized as much as possible. We have decreased all our emissions close to zero, and we only compensate to those remaining emissions to become really net zero in the long term. We often get questions from our clients. Okay, definitions are clear, benefits, risks are clear. How do I get there? Where do I start? South Pole has developed a methodology and a way of supporting companies to set themselves up for success on this journey, and this is called the climate journey. It starts with measuring your footprint and climate-related risks. You have to be able to see what you are dealing with, and then once you know your footprint, once you have assessed your climate-related risks, you need to set a roadmap and create targets to decarbonize and to decrease your environmental footprint and hence your emissions. When you have that, you start working on your actions, you start working on projects and meaningful actions to make sure you stay true to that decarbonization pathway you set for yourself. And along the way, you compensate for your residual emissions. And then at the end, you proudly communicate and lead about that. Just a little bit of segue to the role of carbon credits in this climate journey. Carbon credits and compensation in general is a very powerful way to drive action today. We all know, and we already also mentioned, that achieving net zero will not happen overnight. We have to start a very robust, very meaningful decarbonization. But in the same time, we have to drive climate action today, and compensation and climate action projects and the investment in them is a very credible and impactful way to do that. They show, and engaging with climate action projects show that you take action today. They are a proven way, audited, impact-driven way to mitigate the climate change right now. They also enhance brand reputation. Those projects that are supported by companies bring great stories to your sustainability narrative and show really proven impact. They are very important tool, financial tool, to set an internal price on carbon. Carbon compensation will provide for companies a benchmark price against which they can measure the cost of internal reduction and their opportunities. And of course, climate action projects and carbon credits support the global transition to net zero. Hence, South Pole's view on climate neutrality, as I already mentioned, is that it's a way to demonstrate your action today, but it has to be put in a wider trajectory and wider vision of transitioning to net zero. Long gone the times when we can offset and forget. A couple of years back, it was enough to measure your footprint, offset all your emissions, and you were good to claim climate neutrality. The world has changed, the standards have improved. We know now what a credible climate journey looks like. Hence, climate neutrality is a process where you also focus on decarbonization and where you also set science-based targets that will drive you on the long term to net zero. To help companies with that process, South Pole provides technical guidance to companies, and hence, as a reward, companies can benefit from our labels. We have 3 families around labels: climate neutral labels, where companies can claim climate neutrality for their whole business, a product, a site, or an event. Also, we do offer guidance and support in achieving 100% renewable electricity, and hence reward companies with that label. And a new addition to this team and family is our plastic action labels, the newest offering from our circular economy team, that to demonstrate companies' action on waste and plastic. Labels are really helpful. It's a really helpful tool also in communications, because they help customers and consumers get transparent information certified by a credible third party, South Pole. Those labels, when used in your communication materials or even put on your products, they help customers make decisions with this and the sustainability credentials in mind. And also, labels adhere to the best practice reporting guidance that South Pole is monitoring from close. And that's where I hand over to Matt to tell us about that evolution a little bit more in detail.
Thanks, Kata. So as landscapes evolved, so have our labels. There's been growing concern over climate claims globally. So we've been improving the thresholds for our labels to align with latest climate science. And as the climate science has improved, we've made upgrades and changes to the label standards as well. So we listen to the latest findings of climate science, and we align our labels with best practice across greenhouse gas accounting, target setting, and the use of carbon credits towards those claims. Thanks. Next slide, please, Kelly. So the key differences between our old label and our new labels is increasing the both the robustness of the claim and also requiring our clients to set reduction targets and setting emission reduction plans. So under the previous label, we required our partners to set scope boundaries covering all relevant scope 1, 2, and just scope 1 and 2 emissions. Our new label now requires the inclusion of all relevant scope 3 emission sources. Previously, we just needed a reduction plan to highlight some opportunities to reduce emissions, but we've strengthened that a lot and based it on the Science-Based Target Initiative's targets of 1.5 degree scenarios. We really need clients to set scope 1 and 2 targets aligned with 1.5 degrees, and also scope 3 targets if they are required, at least well below 2 degrees. Previously, we allowed clients to compensate for all material emission sources by investing in high quality carbon action credits. That hasn't changed. We still require our clients to compensate for their emissions, but it's an increased boundary that we've changed the labels to. And now we need the people that are using the label to provide a link to the details about the claim on their company website to increase transparency. So we align our greenhouse gas accounting process with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is the leading greenhouse gas reporting standard. The targets are aligned with the Science-Based Target Initiative, which is the leading global target setting process and frameworks. And the carbon neutrality claim is aligned with the British Standard PAS 2060 for carbon neutrality, which is one of the leading carbon neutral standards globally. So we try and align with the most robust and complete methodologies across those 3 elements of achieving the label. So in summary, including what Kat was saying earlier, compensation of residual emissions on the way to net zero, so the use of carbon credits and achieving climate neutrality, can be really important to set out on that journey and to achieve that interim milestone on the journey towards net zero. It's important to note that climate neutral claims do not count towards corporate net zero claims, and they also do not count towards near-term science-based targets, but they are an important step to take. In the net zero target year, which has to be 2050 at the latest, there's an allowance to use 10 to 20% of carbon removal credits and neutralize any residual emissions that have been unavoided. The use of carbon neutral and climate neutral, they're often used interchangeably. They are slightly different. Carbon neutral accounts for all the carbon dioxide emissions, whereas climate neutral also includes other gases that are accounted for in the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, such as methane, sulfur hexafluoride, and HFCs. And they can only be used when it's clear that it does not mean emissions free. So we need to encourage our clients to be clear and precise about what they are claiming and not using terms like emissions free when it's clearly not the case. South Pole only endorses a company's climate neutrality claim if it meets the level of ambition required by the South Pole climate neutral label, as we outlined on the previous slide, of setting a target that's aligned with 1.5 degrees and covering all material emission sources. So it's really important when clients are using the label and also setting credible claims that they meet the standards and are clear and transparent about what that label and what that claim fully entails and what it means to their consumers and also other partners in this space. Thank you. So I'm going to hand you over to Ben now to talk a little bit more about best practice in client communication. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Matt. So yes, what you've seen there is a lot of the things you need to set up in order to get your claims right, think authentically, make sure you're not accidentally, or dare I say, no one would do it, but on purpose, saying the wrong thing. What this leads you to is the opportunity to do what companies really want to do in a lot of ways, which is start on the stakeholder engagement process, which is really where you start to earn your business benefits around communication. We see there being 2 big benefits, two reasons that you would go out there and speak to different stakeholders about what you're doing. One is because you want the business benefits. You want investors to keep investing. You want to create employee engagement. You want customers to buy your products or buy more of your products. You want all those sorts of things. The other reason, which I think is probably understated in the sustainability climate area, is that you've set these big targets, and there is no way you're going to deliver these targets unless you get quite a lot of people involved in helping you deliver these targets. So in that essence, if you think about it, what we've done is we've gone through and we've asked stakeholders, sustainability is the art often of asking stakeholders what they want you to focus on, and then creating a strategy to deliver that. Well, this is the next part of it, which is, well, we asked you, you told us, and now we need your help delivering it. And I think that's often what's missed from climate and sustainability communications is this realization that what you want is people to play a role. So I like to redefine communications often to involvement. People use the word engagement, but it means too many things to too many people. If I say involvement to you, you know what I mean. And to me, communications is a pathway to involvement. And that becomes the question of all these stakeholders, your leaders, your employees, your investors, your suppliers, the media, your customers. I think that's the core question that you need to ask is, am I just communicating because I think I should communicate? Or am I really, really clear on why I'm communicating with each of these stakeholders and what I want them to do? If we look at the supply chain, or sorry, the value chain of most companies, just on the next slide, please. You start to see, of course, every company is different, but this is a fairly standard looking value chain per se. You will see that realistically, you need people to think differently at every single point of this value chain. You need the people who are creating the things that you buy as your inputs to offer you better inputs, or think about how they create what they create better. You need the people who are running your distribution centers, your stores, your factories, whatever they are, to rethink perhaps where the energy comes from. You need the logistics and supply to go, oh, we could put more electric vehicles, or we could do this, or we could do this. You need your brand and marketing team to be sitting there going, look, we'll try this new product out, and we need the consumer to buy it. Above all that, you need your leaders to be saying, well, I'm going to speak up on this so everybody knows that we're leading on this too, et cetera, et cetera. So this concept of a mass stakeholder, multi-stakeholder engagement model, I think is what's missing from most climate communications. And this idea that you don't just do one piece of communications for everybody, you customize it based on what are they interested in and what can they affect in terms of in terms of delivering on your net zero targets, is a really nice way to look at it. Because I mean, speaking to people about what they want to know about, and you're giving them a role that they can then help deliver your strategy for you. For us, it all starts with what we would call a big idea. Because if you're going to have all these stakeholders, you want to gather them around. And the best way I can explain a big idea is, let's say I'm an employee, and you say to me, hey, look, we've put in a 5-bin system. I want you to use it. The question is why? Now, the question can be, so we reduce waste. That's perfectly good. But why do we want to reduce waste? Because we have a target. Why do we have a target? It's this concept of why. I want you to trial a new EV, some new EVs in our distribution fleet. Why? Because I want to reduce the carbon footprint of our fleet. Why? And and when you start to get to that, you realize you need one answer for everybody. And that's what your big idea is. If you go to the next page, please, you'll see that actually, if you don't have one, don't worry. That's not the slide I see. Keep going. It's okay. If you go to the next page, please. You see somebody who does it really well. If you look at Nike, they're very good at this. They go, why? Because if there is no planet, there's no sport. And what they've done is, instead of telling you they're going to say that we should all save the world, they've made it about my world. If I buy from Nike, or if I'm an employee at Nike, I probably love sport. And if I love sport, I probably care about the conditions at which I do that sport. So if I'm a snowboarder, as you see on the left, I want to be able to snowboard on snow. And I want to be able to do it often, not a little bit of the year. And if I'm a runner, I don't want to be running in a heat wave. And so they get this idea that there's no planet, there is no sport, or save the future of sport is another way to put it. And so you can start to say to people, I want you to use the right thing. Why? Because we want to reduce waste. Why? Because waste is actually a part of climate change. Oh, and if we don't solve climate change, I'll tell you, all those sports you do on the weekend when you're not here, they're at risk. I want you, personally, in my distribution facility, to I want you to look at that EV fleet. Why? Because it's going to reduce our carbon footprint. Why would we want to do that? Because we want to reduce the impact of climate change. Because, hey, we're about sport. And there's going to be a lot of the sport we play is not going to be available. So it gives you that anchor of which you can engage every single stakeholder and make it personal and relevant. So I think pinning everything to that first is the important thing, is an important thing that most companies don't do well. Please keep going. Once you've got a big idea, it allows you the springboard to break your messaging up. The reason we chose Nike is just because it's a brand everyone relates to, for one. The other one is that, like all communications, they're very good at it. Now, they're doing good things, but they're communicating it well. So they're managing to get that nexus right of action and communication. So once you've got a big idea, you can start speaking big messages because you're confident in your messages because you've had look at your messages and make sure they're authentic and credible and all those things. And you can start to go and make claims out there and attach them to big messaging. So not just say, we're going to do this, but boom, we're going to do this, and put a little bit of interesting about them, if you like. Please move on. The next thing that you can do, not everybody does this, but I think it's good, which is to start to brand your climate program. The reason being, of course, if you go think back to that supply chain or that value chain that we were looking at, there's a lot of initiatives that got to happen for you to go net zero, like hundreds and hundreds. So if I see that bin system there or that EV over there or that whatever it may be, how do I know that that's just another little thing contributing to this bigger goal? And the way you do that, of course, is you brand it. So if you start to look at Nike stuff, if you walk into one of their stores, if you go shop online, some of their products will be tagged move to zero. Now, they'll also do that with their internal programs, their internal waste program, whatever it might be. So if you start to see, okay, this is different to the other things, whether it be a program or a product, I know that it's different in a way that's contributing to this climate strategy, and therefore all these things start to add up in my head towards that big idea. The other thing you'll note just from what you see in this slide is they're not ashamed of using multiple touch points. You know, not everybody has a consumer packaging as part of their part of what they do as a company, but you'll see they've used it very effectively to talk to me about move to zero. We're aiming towards zero carbon and zero waste, so they've combined the two. And then you see it to help protect the future of sport. So it ladders to that big idea. And then when you open that shoebox, you know so much about that product already just from reading your actual shoebox. So you can see that that branding combined with the big idea helps to ladder your programs. Please, next slide. The next thing they do well is, in my experience, in my 15 years of doing this, sustainability lives in spreadsheets. It really is a scientific space. You're measuring things, you're making payoffs against things, you're understanding how changing something will change everything else. The spreadsheets are not a great engagement tool. They are for some people, but they're not for most people. So the ability to take spreadsheets and make that information accessible to the average person is really important. So simplifying all your strategic documents into something that maybe not the average persons are going to know, but certainly people who are bothering to get a little bit more information are going to understand is important. What you're seeing here is simply a footprint. Now, as I say, that starts as a spreadsheet, but it's been visualized. So going through and using design in a way that visualizes your technical data is a really important way to make the detail of your strategy accessible, which in itself is important because it means that when people ask those questions, why aren't you doing this instead of doing this? You can say, well, look, let me show you this data and this, it's not so simple. Whereas if you're going, well, look at this spreadsheet, it's not so simple, you don't have that ability to make that response as effectively. Next slide, please. Once we've started to get those things right, so if you think of those things, they're kind of relevant to all audiences, they're setting you up, you can start to go stakeholder by stakeholder, and the people you need to begin with is your leaders. If your leaders are not leading on climate, well, that sends a signal, it's not that important. Your job as a leader is to tell your organization what is important. There are many ways you can do this, and the first one is to simply train them. Spend the time that they understand, not necessarily every detail climate, but enough detail that they can speak confidently on the topic. That gives you a springboard also to media, because of course, as soon as you are able to speak confidently, you're able to make comment on what the company is doing, and you're able to start getting that corporate level communications. And if you've got a leadership team of, let's say, 10 people, and each of them can confidently speak on the topic or various topics within it, then you've got a really good opportunity to speak to the market. And of course, corporate communications is a great way to get to investors, but also government and the like, and regulators and all those sorts of people. So having your leaders do that gives you that voice. It also gives you a strong voice internally where they can lead programs, speak confidently in programs, which in turn brings your employees along, which is important, of course, because they really hold the key here. Please move on. Employees, once again, everyone talks about employee engagement. What does engagement mean? If I ask 10 of you that, I will get 10 answers. Employee engagement is not as strong as employee involvement. So here you see a great little canteen program from Nike, where they've gone, well, look, we can't say we're about zero waste and still be using straws and plastic forks in the canteen. So with a mix of, we're banning all the single-use stuff and we're giving you your package, and you're going to have to use that package, and we're putting in place the infrastructure so it can be cleaned every day. By doing this, you are helping contribute to our net zero target, our waste target within our net zero target, which in turn is helping protect the future of sport. So you can see giving people a small role in the big picture helps them understand. Next slide, please. Once you've got all this, you start to be able to speak about it. You can talk about the results of your internal engagement campaign. How did it work? How didn't it work? People are very interested in that sort of stuff. As I said before, you can go and speak up into that. You can start to speak about also the sorts of innovations you're bringing through, those sorts of things. Here you see, you start to get the media that really companies are looking for. Please move on. Reporting is important. It's an investor engagement tool. Once you've got all this conversation worked out, you start to make your reporting a little bit more engaging by telling stories, not just the statistics. I had a really good long conversation with one of our clients this morning about this too, and we lamented the fact that why is reporting a yearly thing? It's like it's based on the annual report as a concept. But what if sustainability reporting was something you did all year round? I think setting up like what we call story engines within your organization, where every month you're going around and going, who's got stories? Let's get them, let's package them, let's get the photos, let's tell the story, let's put it out there on our blogs, let's put it on internal, potentially external channels. And then every year, instead of it being like cramming for an exam, which most sustainability reports are for sustainability, you go, well, we've already done the revision all year, we've just got to package that, get some extra data and put it out there. So thinking of reporting not just as a report, but a constant report back to your investors and potentially other stakeholders thinks is a good idea. Please keep going. Programs, partnership and innovation. Customers is a big space. There's many things you can do. You can partner with an NGO to bring an impact program to life. You can do some communications about some things you've done. New product development is probably the best form of consumer engagement. It gets you good media and it gives customers a new reason to try a new thing. So using sustainability, climate as a springboard for innovation is it's really strong, rich territory. Here you see three of Nike's. You go, Nike's, you go vegan range. Instead of just doing a vegan range, why don't we partner with a famous vegan, Billy Ellis, and get her to help us design the range? And then someone's going, you know what, we're trying to reduce packaging. Why is it every time we send a box of shoes, we stick it in a box? And then we send the box in the box, and then somebody throws it in two boxes. Why don't we redesign a shoe box so that it's actually the box that you send in? We just put the address on it. And suddenly, bang, you've got innovation and you've got media. And then what about if we started to innovate around shoes that we can pull into pieces, which are not available yet, but hey, we're learning and we're going to come back to the market and talk about what we're learning, which is a wonderful thing. And suddenly you can not just wait till you've done the thing, you can take the consumer on the journey of what you're doing so that when it's done, they already know it's coming. Please keep going. When you look at this as a, please, thank you. And so suddenly, and then you get to these other touch points, which are often missed for consumers. Social media, don't talk about your strategy, talk about the stories of what you're doing within that strategy. People engage with stories. They don't want to know about your strategy. That's for your internal teams and those sorts of things, your investors. And then we did a piece of research recently, which looked at what is most believed by consumers when it comes to seeing a company as a sustainability leader, and the two main touch points were on-pack and in-store. In-store is totally missed. However, if you were to walk into Cotton On, we asked customers, we asked consumers which brands they see as leading sustainability in Australia. The three they come up with were Woolies, Coles and Cotton On. Woolies and Coles don't surprise me that much. Cotton On is really punching above its weight there in that category. And if you walk into their stores, you'll see why. There is sustainability messaging everywhere about their jeans, about their socks, about everything, about donate to our charity, all those sorts of things. So using your floor space to talk to people about what you're doing is a hugely missed opportunity in our experience. Let's keep going. When you put it together, you end up with a big idea that leads everything. You end up with credible claims that can be turned into messaging. You end up with simple design and visuals that take the technical and make it accessible. You end up with leaders who can speak confidently. You end up with employees who are given a role and understand how that little piece adds to a big picture. You end up with media that's speaking about stuff because you're doing interesting things. What does the news speak about? New things. So you get news by doing new things. You have corporate communications that's broken down not into just an investment report once a year, but ongoing ways of engaging investors. And you have customer campaigns and innovation and in-store and on-pack that engages them. And it's by looking at this as a whole of stakeholder model that are all contributing back to this, this cause of net zero, pinned to a big idea, that you really start to not only get the business benefits out of doing it, but also get everybody pulling in the same direction to actually turn this strategy that you're making into a reality. Next slide, please. So 3 key takeaways. I'm summing up for everybody here. Number one, the world is, I would say it's not even changing, it's changed. 3 years ago, if you were looking at this, you'd be saying it's changing. Now it's like, if you're, it's net zero to play. It's like a game of poker where everyone's all in to play. You've got to be doing this now. It's not a conversation. It's not an if. It's not a when. It's a now. You people who are not doing this are probably already feeling the pinch, and they're going to feel it a lot worse very, very shortly. You cannot, however, go out and do anything unless you know what you are doing and how it can be spoken about. The risks have gone through the roof with things like raids in Europe on companies that have been greenwashing. That will come here too, we know it. The days of I can just do this and stick a stamp, as Carter said, are gone. You need to know your claims, you need to get them right. But on the plus side, when you're confident in your claims, you can go out and speak them. And then smart comms is about involving and inspiring. You know, first I need to be inspired to feel that this is worth doing, and that's the big idea. Make it relevant to me. And then I need to be enabled. I need to understand, okay, I'm inspired now, but how do I do it? So I need to be given my very distinct role in delivering this, and then encouraged and rewarded to do it. And that's a stakeholder by stakeholder model if you do it well. So thank you very much. I'll pass back to Georgia for questions.
Thank you, Ben, and thanks to Matt and Carter as well. I know my clients and I certainly have a lot of interesting conversations around climate communications, and I agree, spreadsheets aren't that sexy, but that is where climate action is often tracked, so communications come in handy there. It looks like we have some questions that have rolled in, so let's move on to the Q&A. The question for you, Carter, number one, what would be alternative claims I can make if I'm neither net zero or climate neutral?
Yeah, really good question. Thanks a lot. So it's really important to publish claims or communication that is true to what you are actually doing, that demonstrates and describes your real climate action. So those should evolve around the way you are compensating your emissions, the way you are taking responsibility to your emissions, and the way you are creating impact to mitigate climate change. Engaging with climate action projects is a really smart way also to be leveraged in your communication strategy as well, because those high quality carbon credits and projects have substantiated SDG impacts and impacts on communities, and those stories and those impacts can be very well leveraged and used within your communication. So yeah, be authentic, be credible and true to your actions, and focus on the impact you make.
Excellent, thank you, Kata. Now we have a question for Nat. For your label requirements, would I need to publish my reduction plan to get the label?
So we need clients to publish a target, and that can be either on their website through reporting such as CDP, or if they want to set science-based targets and get them validated, the SBTi website is a great source to publish targets. We don't need people to publish exactly how they're going to achieve those targets, so we don't need in-depth insights in emission reduction strategies, noting these are often confidential and proprietary to their individual operations. So it's the publishing of the target that we need.
Wonderful, thank you, Matt. Next question goes to you, Ben. What if your business has no retail customers, i.e. B2B? How and who do you engage?
Everyone has customers, just not necessarily the retail customers. So back to the order of engagement for me is leadership 1, employees 2, definitely, potentially suppliers 3, and that depends on your situation. Probably customers next. Now, customers is a broad term, remember. If you're, say, Unilever, your customer is Woolies, but your consumer is the person who buys it from it, or your customer is whoever distributes. So your customers next, and then I would go in investors, because that's more of a reporting style approach. We deal with a lot of B2B. We deal with Autodesk, which is the maker of AutoCAD, enormous design and make company. They have no direct customer. They sell to big companies. What you do with anybody is you go, what is my customer or consumer care about? What's in their sustainability strategy if they're a corporate customer, or what is in their concerns in their mind if they're a consumer? Therefore, how can I give them what they want? All great comms starts with the audience and audience insights. So you look at that and you go, well, I'm going to engage you on the things that you care about, and give you more of what you want, and give you a role in getting what I want, aligned around those issues.
Good point. Thanks, Ben. Kata, we might go back to you. Is there as much scrutiny on plastics and waste claims?
Yeah, what we see is that there is a general scrutiny around authenticity and credibility of climate actions. And what we see is consumers or consumer-facing products or products in the FMCG sector are equally scrutinized on plastic and the waste they generate. So it's really important for companies to get their climate action right in a holistic manner. Although in terms of investor reactions or media reactions, we see bigger scrutiny on carbon and the emissions that we produce.
Question for you, Matt. If compensation can be part of climate neutrality, how do I ensure I invest in good projects?
So the carbon credits that you purchase are really important. So as Kata mentioned earlier, a number of them have sustainable development goal co-benefits. It's really important to align the offsets and credits that you purchase with a broader sustainability strategy to feed into your comms and marketing approach. So when we're looking at quality carbon credits, there's a few credit standards such as Vera Gold Standard, which have a range of methodologies to produce carbon credits, and making sure that you do your due diligence around what you're purchasing, making sure that the project and the methodology aligns with ICROA, which is the leading sort of auditing standard for carbon credits, and making sure that you're confident that those credits are additional, real, the projects have actually occurred on the ground, is really, really important to ensure that they're robust and that they're verified carbon credits.
Thank you for that, Matt. I think we'll just have one last question here for you, Ben. Do you have any good or bad examples of companies that explain the why well?
Oh, I do. I have so many. Nike obviously is a good one. No planet, no sport. Got it. Volvo. Go have a look at Volvo. Climate is the ultimate safety test. If you engage with Volvo, if you're an employee or if you're a buyer of Volvo, safety matters to you. Well, you're not safe in climate change, so we're going to deal with it. It's a good one. There are other ones that are probably less exact, but are still good. You've got Bloomberg, face the data, change the world. To change, we need to understand where we're at. We have the data, we have the power to change the world. That's a pretty strong one too. There's a beautiful, if you want one thing to do, go and Google National Geographic. I can't remember what it's called, but it's the 4th minute. And they have this idea that basically we've been here for 3 minutes. like in the essence of time, if time was 1 hour, and we may not make it to the 4th minute unless we change. It's the most amazing video ever. Have a look at his epic message. Will want you to save the world. Put that in National Geographic into YouTube and see that as a big idea. Let's get to the 4th minute. So there's just a few examples for you.
That sounds fabulous. I'll have to look that one up then.
I'll put it in the chat there.
Yeah, that would be lovely. I think with that, we've come to the end of our time. We might wrap up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. And thank you to our wonderful speakers, Kata, Ben, and Nat, for your time and insights. I hope everyone enjoyed the session. And we hope it helps you with your own climate communications. If you do have any questions or want support in navigating this space, there's an email here that you can send them to. And any questions that we didn't get to in this session, I think we covered all of them. But if there's any more, we will follow up in an email and we'll provide a copy of the recording after the session. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and thank you again for joining.